Hey folks, let's learn something new about the oil and gas industry. All right, today we're at the Tibco Energy Forum in Houston, Texas, and I got two very special guests. I have Michael O'Connell and Ted Brown. We'll edit that out. So gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me a little bit of your time. So let's just jump right into it. So one of the things that my audience finds fascinating is what they call the digital oil field, and it's what the rest of the world calls the Internet of Things. You want to talk a little bit about Tibco's experience in looking at IoT?
Oh, sure. So we work in the energy space. We work with upstream, midstream, and downstream companies, and all of those companies have data that's in motion. And we've seen over the last 5 years or so, equipment that needs to be running around the clock has started to become instrumented. Instrumentation with a variety of sensors. So we had a presentation today. A guy was talking about monitoring their electric submersible pumps as part of their artificial lift systems. You know, when there's not enough pressure for the oil to come out of the ground on its own, you lift it out. And so in the more lucrative assets, they put these electric submersible pumps down in there to push the oil out, fast. And those pumps these days have become instrumented with sensors to measure things like the temperature of the motor and the pressure, the intake pressure on the pump, and the load and the current and things like that. So this particular customer today was talking about managing about 2,500 of these wells that had these electric submersible pumps, and the data were coming out of them on a second-by-second basis. They're going to telemetry systems that are then pushing that data into historian databases, and we're picking up the data from those databases. Now that data, when it's been on the ground for a while, you build up a history. And when a pump fails or starts to produce lower than you might expect it to, or it shuts down altogether, or intermittently cuts out, these are patterns that the engineers have kept track of. And so we can mine the historical data to find when there's a pattern like that. We can look backwards in time to find a leading indicator in the sensor data that predicts that pattern. Now we can rigorously test that through the historical data and find the optimal threshold at which the pressure might go above a certain amount while the current drops at a certain rate. And we can find combinations of rules and models that predict those stoppages or events of interest. And then we can trap those rules and put them on our real-time infrastructure. So, just an aside, Tibco has both analytics and event processing software. So the patterns that you identify on historical data can be put into action on the real-time data. So now, once you've determined these on the historical data in Spotfire, you've got these rules now up in Streambase, our event processing product. As the data starts flowing, from the telemetry systems for the 2,500, pumps that are in the field, you can push them through these rules that you've developed in the historical data, and when the pressure goes above a certain amount, combined with the current going below a certain level, you can send a notification. So the notification can go as an email to somebody, or an entry into a database, or a business process management system. We can even launch a root cause analysis with contextual data about the well and its history, and all of a sudden the engineer has got at his fingertips something just happened that's an anomalous behavior, and they've got all the context, and they can decide how to intervene and stop that pump from going down or burning out, or keep the oil production at a high level. There's a number of use cases in the case study today that were presented. Some gnarly pictures of pumps that were burned out, and this is a high value problem because with the margin of oil in the production area being so tight now with the low price of oil, you got to make the most of it. You got to have the pumps operating 24/7 to get the oil production flowing and keep the margin up. So we're able to kind of combine analytics on historical data with real-time data, sensor data coming off of these devices that are on the internet, and monitor them and keep them up and running 24/7.
Yeah, and so make sure I understand this right. So what you're actually impacting with the science is uptime and operational efficiencies. So you're driving real dollars, right?
Absolutely. So the history that Tibco has within the oil and gas industry, specifically with our analytics offering, Tibco acquired a company called Spotfire in 2007. And initially, we were really focused on analytics for data scientists, and enabling kind of what you would expect for maybe Excel replacement, charts, graphs, kind of rudimentary analytics. But now, as we're enabling companies to climb the analytics maturity curve, we're getting into really huge dollar impacts where, we might tweak one thing where they can monitor proactively a pump or another device that could impact a company for, $50 million a year just because of that one capability that we add. So it's exciting.
Yeah, so Ted, let me ask you this. Are you starting to see more of an interest in oil and gas from the business, not IT, not the data scientists, but from the business about using science and technology to increase efficiencies?
I mean, there's no doubt about that. Before everything was basically done on spreadsheets, and now as data has become pervasive, data is everywhere, and you have the kind of younger crew that's coming on board to oil and gas companies that they're used to the immediacy of things, having a smartphone in their hand and being able to get at data immediately from a consumer perspective. They now want that within the companies. These large industrial companies are really adopting a much faster time to market for analyzing data, and in turn that has these huge dollar impacts that are just undeniable.
Yeah, and we think this will be a game changer starting in 2016 and moving forward. We've talked about that in the past. So, Michael, another question for you. So, when you look at big data, the oil and gas industry historically has had big data everywhere. But is the new thing that you bring to the market and the new thing that's helping business, is it the analytics part, to be able to separate the 1% of the big data that's actually impactful to my business versus the 99% that's not?
Well, sure, we do. We look at historical data and we big data sets, and we find the outliers. Spot the fire. Spotfire is the name of our analytics product, and it helps you find anomalies.
Is that where the name came from?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well, some fires are good, and you want to stoke them up. Some fires are bad, and you want to put them out. And so, finding the outliers and the anomalies is what Spotfire is really good at. It allows you to bring in multivariate data from a variety of sources, mash it up, and then display it in these visually compelling ways that make things jump out to you. And you can see, oh, there's an issue over here. Let me go find out what's going on with this. And that can, like I say, can be from a mashup of different data sources, or quite complex big data sources can be brought to bear in an interactive visual analysis. And the more variables, the better. Multivariate analysis, I think you mentioned, the more the better, because Spotfire allows you to slide these filters around and color and shape and trellis, and the more dimensions, bring it on as far as our product is concerned. You find these pockets of hotspots, and then you kind of drill down and find out what's the root cause underneath that. Now, once you kind of have historical analysis on the big data and you understand where the anomalies are coming from, what's driving them, then you can put those up onto the real-time system and monitor from IoT and sensor data those patterns that you've discovered on the history. You can now apply in real time. And I think Ted mentioned the notifications, and all the millennials. Even when I'm an old guy, but I pick up my phone, one of the first things I do is I swipe down and see what are my notifications. What meetings have I got to be at, or So I look at my notifications. Well, notifications that are analytically driven off this equipment. A young guy in the field swipes down and says, "Oh, pump number 33 in location A or whatever's having an issue. I can go fix that, or I can, depending on the type of issue, I can leave it, or whatever." So the world of hyperconnectivity and instantaneous notification and action, that's kind of where we're at. And it's kind of lucky that we're at that, because we kind of got to this oversupply of oil and low prices because we've created an oversupply of oil. And now we're in this digital age where we can kind of deal with it. And margin has become so critical, right? I mean, when oil was above $100 a barrel, some pump goes down. I mean, who cares? Go drill another hole or whatever. It's like money is just flowing. But now at $50 or $40, margin, never used to be much of a consideration in E&P, and now it really is. And so kind of keeping the machines up 24/7 and optimizing the flow of oil, that's how people are, getting competitive advantage these days.
Yeah. And tell you one thing that Tibco does really well, because we're at their user forum. Your customers don't look at you as vendors. I see it. I saw it in the forum. Your customers look at you as partners. That's fantastic, right? You're actually helping them solve real business issues, and they're bringing you to the table saying, "Hey, we need some more help."
Right. Yeah. So the Houston Energy Forum, we've done this now for 13 years running. And, it started off with a small group of fervent folks that were using Spotfire, really getting a lot of value out of it. And we recognized from the beginning that sharing those success stories, sharing those use cases that are high value, like we talked about before, we can stand back and have the customers interact with one another, and maybe with folks that aren't using Spotfire whatsoever, and they can get great ideas. And at this point, it's really an ecosystem that's kind of fed upon itself. Like, for example, I think we have 12 or 13 partners that have signed up for participation in this event over the 2 days here. They're here bringing their customers on board, and it's a whole ecosystem where partners are talking to each other, customers are talking to each other, the use cases get more and more innovative, and we can kind of stand back and watch it happen, and it's a beautiful thing. It's really, from a career perspective, Michael and I have been at this for a long time. This is where, you really get some joy out of, how you're making an impact in the world, and how you're, really leaving a legacy behind of what it is that you do.
Yeah, it feels good to do good work, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, Ted, Michael, thank you so much for your time. We hope this helped. We will see you next time. I have Michael O'Connell, and I cannot remember your name.